Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. We are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hello and welcome, everyone. I am, as always, your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the Free State Project, Eric Brakey, here for episode 33 of the Porcupine Report. Thank you so much for joining me today. A few news items to report on. Yesterday, Tuesday, there are a few big things happening in politics. I know everyone around the country was watching the presidential debate, and hey, cool if that's your thing. If you just following the race for the White House and ignoring all the really important races that are happening closer to home where we can all have an impact. But here in New Hampshire, folks are pretty excited, and we want to extend congratulations to our friend Lily Tang Williams, Free Stater and a survivor of Chinese communism, who came to America in pursuit of freedom and liberty and was disappointed to find that it was slipping away in our own country. Anyway, Lily Tang Williams won her primary for the 2nd District of New Hampshire, the Republican nomination. She goes up for a head-to-head contest in the general. Anyway, I personally am excited for her, and I want to extend congratulations, and there's plenty of race ahead. So good luck, Lily. I also want to tell you to, if you haven't done so already, go ahead, like, share, and subscribe to spread the show. We're coming to you every single Wednesday at 7:00 p.m. with a new episode. We've been doing this for 33 weeks now, 33 episodes. Everyone, I'm proud to stand behind, and I hope that you are enjoying the show and you're sharing it with your friends, your family, and your neighbors. I mean, if they like freedom. If they like freedom, they'll like the show. If they, want to live in a tyrannical state and not a free state, well, maybe they won't like the show. But your friends who love freedom will love it. So send it along. And I also, there are always so many great events taking place within the community of the Free State movement. If you look at our community calendar on the fsp.org website, it's like events every single day. So many homegrown events. Well, one homegrown event, one that I'm personally homegrowing, I'm looking forward to this Sunday at the Shell Liberty Clubhouse in the Seacoast region of the Free State. We are doing a play reading of Star Wars: Verily a New Hope. It's apparently a play written by William Shakespeare that had been lost for centuries. Apparently some guy, George Lucas, came and did a remake of it in the 70s. But as a movie. But originally, in the Elizabethan England, William Shakespeare wrote Star Wars: Verily a New Hope, with characters like Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Princess Leia, all in iambic pentameter. And we're doing a read-through of it with all your favorite Free Staters, including many of your favorite guests on this show, including Dennis Pratt reading the role of Darth Vader. Anyway, it's going to be a lot of fun. 1:30 p.m. this Sunday at the Shell. Find out more about that event and so many of our community events happening at fsp.org on our community calendar. All right. And before I welcome our guest onto the show, I want to say a quick word of thanks to our sponsor for today's episode, which is Porcupine Real Estate, the original Free State real estate agency doing business in New Hampshire for more than 15 years. A regular sponsor for PorcFest and Liberty Forum. Porcupine Real Estate has managed more than 450 successful real estate transactions across the entire state, helping you move into your new home when you're ready to leave the tyrannical 49 behind and build a life here in the granite Free State of New Hampshire. And by the way, I will mention I'm wearing a button I got from Porcupine Real Estate when they were sponsoring Liberty Forum this past year. It says, I'm on the list, NH Liberty Leader, from your friends at Porcupine Real Estate. They were honoring those who managed to make the enemies list of of Granite State Matters, one of our hate groups. Who anyway, I was proud to be on their enemies list, and so many Free Staters were too. But anyway, but the team at Porcupine Real Estate includes 4-time state representative Mark Warden and Carla Garrick, both past guests on this show. And Porcupine Real Estate brings to your home buying experience expert knowledge of the Granite State, a liberty-minded focus catering to those who value personal freedom, community connections into New Hampshire's unique free state culture, personalized service, and relocation expertise to make your moving process seamless and stress-free, whether you're moving across the country or across town. Learn more and find your new home in the Free State at porcupinerealestate.com. Thank you to Porcupine Real Estate for sponsoring this episode. All right, now let's hop back into the meat and potatoes of our show here. And I'm looking forward to welcoming onto our show our guest for today. She is someone who, if you follow Libertarian Party politics, you're probably at least somewhat aware of. Her name is Angela McArdle. She is the chairman of the National Libertarian Party. She's serving her second term in that role. She came into that role as a leader in the Mises Caucus when they took over the party at their convention several years back. And I just attended my first National Libertarian Convention. I happened to watch Angela McArdle very handily handle a very stressful, cantankerous convention. No easy feat, and do it like a pro. So we're going to talk about any number of things today. I even solicited a few questions from folks online. Let's welcome to the show, Angela McArdle. Hi, Angela.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
Well, glad to have you on. Thanks for coming on. All right. The top question folks online were asking, Angela, when are you planning your move to New Hampshire?
I'm hoping that climate change is real and that it warms up a little bit. I am nestled down in southern United States in Austin, Texas right now. Enjoying the heat. Well,
Austin is a nice place. I've spent a year and a half down there myself, but I'll tell you, one of the great advantages of the cold winters we get here is that we got plentiful groundwater. So I know you came out from California where there's all those water wars going on all the time.
Yes.
We never have to worry about it in New Hampshire.
Yes.
So
not going back to California. I will say that when civilization collapses, I will come to New Hampshire. Hopefully I'll beat the rush. Okay, great.
All right. So when civilizational collapse happens, we got 100%. You on the list. All right. That's a promise. That's a commitment. All right. We'll just wait for the collapse of the dollar and maybe total nuclear war from this fight that Joe Biden is picking with the Russians.
I'm hoping that doesn't happen. We have a big anti-war rally in 2 weeks trying to push back against that narrative. But I was thinking more like if the dollar collapses, something like that, then you'll definitely find me at that point.
Okay, great. So you're not trying to weasel out of moving to New Hampshire by avoiding total nuclear war. There are other paths that could get you there.
There are other paths. I feel like if nuclear war happens, I'll just be, I don't know that I'd be able to get up there, right? Like, it's like you're like banging two rocks together because that's all that's left, trying to eat burned up sticks.
Yeah, I mean, we'll you have a horse and buggy kind of plan kind of set aside for you. It might be like the old
I
Oregon
don't live
Trail
too far
days,
from Alex Jones, so I've got my iodine situation squared away. Super blue toothpaste, all the good stuff.
All right. Well, we joke about the things that are actually pretty scary going on in the world, because I guess that's one way to process the real threat of nukes flying. But speaking of war, today is I guess fairly important anniversary in the history of American warfare, which is it's the 23rd anniversary of the 9/11 attacks against the Twin Towers in New York and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. 23 years later, obviously there's there's a lot we've learned over the last 23 years, including about the nature of our own government's willingness to exploit our fears to take power onto themselves. But what takeaways and what kind of reflections do you have on the 9/11 Twin Tower attacks 23 years later?
Man, I feel like I actually feel a little bit encouraged because some people are learning and waking up. But regarding, wars for empire and blowback and consequences. But it is a little discouraging also that it seems to have taken about 20 years for populist conservatives, not libertarian conservatives, just like kind of populist MAGA movement people to say, hey, I think maybe, United States foreign policy had something to do with that. And, I think that's sort of interesting. It really tells you, like, what is the timeline for people who are like a little bit more normie to adopt peaceful foreign policy. And it's like they lag 20 years behind. And so that's been sort of the interesting takeaway for me.
What do you make of the fact that over that same 20-year period, the anti-war left on a lot of these questions seems to have disappeared and been, I guess, assimilated into the
Sure.
the neocon, neoliberal Borg?
There's a little fraction of the anti-war left over. They're the Jimmy Dore types, the Craig Pastajardula, Kim Iverson. They're out there. In 2023, we got together with them when the Ukraine war popped off, shortly after that. And we said, we're very concerned about war escalating and it becoming nuclear war. And we said, we're going to put together a movement. And I felt really excited that the Libertarian Party sort of reignited the anti-war movement. We got to be at the forefront of that with the remnant of the anti-war left. And by working with them, something I learned is they're like the Libertarian Party version of the left. There's a small, kind of scrappy, difficult to get along with, but very principled. And the rest of the anti-war left, that was just a trend. It's just an anti-George Bush trend. Obama just completely evaporated it. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that there was any principle in it. It was just, like, we just don't like George Bush, so we're just going to yell. And they happen to be right on one issue. But it's like, how right are you if you don't care once Barack Obama gets elected?
Yeah, but at least Obama talked a good game, right? And the rhetoric was all that mattered, apparently.
I actually think he spoke more slowly in his speeches. Like, it was the most painful thing. Everybody talks about what a great, how great he was at giving speeches. And it was like nails on a chalkboard to me. Like, you have to turn his speeches up to like 2.0 because he's so slow. He's like the opposite of Ben Shapiro. So I personally find Barack Obama's speeches torturous. I just want that to go on the record.
Well, he's right. He's very good at like saying nothing in a way that sounds profound because of his tonality and the speed of it. It's kind of like the kind of thing Kamala Harris is always trying to achieve as she says nothing gobbledygook, but she's just like she just doesn't have it.
Unburdened by lack of talent. Yes.
I bet you if you took that same script and gave it to Barack Obama, though, it would sound different.
It would be different.
But I guess so. What is this event that's coming up in 2 weeks? The Rage Against the War Machine. I remember you doing an event like this a year or two back.
So I think it's really great that we're pushing this on September 11th. We have a big anti-war rally on September 28th. It's called Rage Against the War Machine. We have united with dissident lefties, with people of all political backgrounds. We pulled some conservatives in because the anti-war conservatives are starting to pop up here and there to say no to the war machine. We want to see the military-industrial complex rebuked, dismantled, dissolved, gone. We want to see Julian Assange officially pardoned. We want to see the CIA dissolved, and that's maybe lower on the list of things that are realistic, but you got to start somewhere. We're putting it out there. And so we're getting together. We're having a ton of awesome speakers come up on stage. Scott Horton, Keith Knight of the Libertarian Institute. I would love to extend an invitation to Lily Tang Williams. I know she'll be very busy campaigning, but if she can make it away, we'd love to put her on the main stage because she's just like fabulous. And we'll be doing that Saturday afternoon at the I believe it's called the Washington Mall in front of the Washington Memorial. It's a huge production, cost a lot of money to put it together, but we think it's very important to get this message out, to get a bunch of people there rallied and hyped about peaceful foreign policy, and to do it with a bunch of politicians present too, because we've also invited a lot of congressmen.
Who are you anyone from Congress you're expecting to be there?
We've extended an invitation to Thomas Massey. Not sure if he'll be able to attend yet. Colonel Douglas McGregor will be on the main stage with us.
He's excellent.
We're hopeful that Matt Gaetz might be able to join us. Like we're trying, you know, we're roping people in.
Yeah. You know, I got to meet Matt Gaetz briefly at the Republican National Convention this year and got to thank him for raging against the war machine. So it does seem like a nice fit for him to be there, even though, right, it's not, I bet that some people would freak out that, not that you are kind of forming coalition with some left-wing voices, but that you might have a sitting congressman, Republican like Matt Gaetz there. What would you say to folks who, about coalition building, whether it's with folks on the right or on the left?
Well, that's the future of politics. Political parties are becoming less and less relevant right now. You know, people might scream hearing me say that as the chair of the National Libertarian Party, but I've got my finger on the pulse. I can see what's happening. I started talking about this in 2022. You're going to start seeing alliances shifting to the point that the political party itself becomes less and less relevant. That's what's happening right now with Donald Trump's campaign. That's what's happening with all the alliances that we're making. You know, he's pulled Tulsi Gabbard on. We started doing coalition work with the left in 2022. Kennedy started doing coalition work and outreach, you know, by showing up at Pork Fest and Freedom Fest when he started his campaign. Now he's joined forces with Donald Trump. You know, Trump was doing outreach to us saying, I'll put a libertarian in my cabinet. I'll free Ross Ulbricht. It's really all about coalitioning, building a broad coalition, having broad appeal, and, you know, getting as many people on your side and your team as possible. And so I'm super excited about all of that. I'm super excited to be a part of it.
Well, let me ask you, I guess that leads into some other questions I want to ask you about. Well, I want to ask you about your vision with the Libertarian Party, but I guess before we get to that, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I'd be curious to know a little bit more about your individual personal journey. How did you get into the Liberty movement in the first place? And how did you get from there to here? How did you get from wherever you got started to, you know, you're the chairman of the National Libertarian Party? What's your journey been?
Oh, incremental, my friend. I grew up in a fairly traditional Southern Christian home. My father was a minister. He also, though, he pastored a Christian Missionary Alliance church, and he also worked for an organization called Far East Broadcasting Company. There was a heavy emphasis on mission specifically to communist countries. So I have always viewed government through a lens of distrust. You know, as young as 8 years old, maybe younger than that. Like I was used to hearing horror stories, missionaries and survivors coming back to speak at the church to talk about, you know, like, this is what happened to me in Vietnam. I've met people who crawled out of Pol Pot's killing fields, like, wow. You know, crawled out after being hit in the head with the blunt end of an axe, ran across the border, shot in the shoulder, still crawled through, you know, to make it to safety, barely came out alive. I've met people that came out of the gulags in Soviet Russia. I have never been a fan of government, you know. From that perspective, it's like government hates religious freedom. Government hates individualism. You know, like in China, you've got to be a member of the sanctioned, correct Christian church. Very suspicious. So it wasn't difficult for me to become a libertarian from a conservative when I was a teenager. I've always been very interested in politics. I was like that weird little kid who was like very excited about the mock election we had in 4th grade. Like, oh, you know, put your vote in the shoebox. Oh, who did you vote for? Who did you vote for? Don't vote for Bill Clinton. My dad said he's bad, you know, like that kind of.
I was that kid too. I think I may have been the only one in my 2nd grade class who voted for Bob Dole.
There you go.
Everyone else told me he wanted us to have more homework, which is ironic considering I think until Donald Trump, he was the last nominee for a major party campaigning on abolishing the Department of Education. So those 2nd grade Democrats didn't know what they were talking about.
No idea. You know, so I became a libertarian, a libertarian when I was like 17, just having a conversation with someone about libertarianism versus being a Republican. I don't think I really understood conservatism at that point in time, and I think that most people don't. You know, it's a term that gets used and thrown around quite a bit.
Yeah. What exactly are you trying to conserve? Let's define that.
Yeah. Social conservative, fiscal conservatism. What does that mean? What are the exceptions to the rule? I basically just decided, you know, I was like a Republican that was okay with weed and gay marriage because that sounded totally reasonable. You know, I had a lot of friends that smoked weed. It was like, well, they shouldn't go to jail. That's, you know, that's terrible. I feel bad for my friends. And gay people, you know, like, shouldn't conservatives want them to get married so that they're not, you know, running around being a degenerate and all of that?
Yeah. Ultimately participating in a conservative institution.
Correct.
Yeah,
So that was my like very low resolution understanding of libertarianism, you know, being pro-gun.
Yeah.
And then I read The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. And I just kind of, my worldview just sort of imploded. Was like, everything I know is a lie. The Federal Reserve is going to murder me. It's all fake. It's all going to collapse. Just like a total like freak out over that. I remember just like kind of hiding inside for like a week, having an existential crisis, wondering when they were going to get me, you know, for figuring it out. And then Ron Paul ran for president, and I realized, oh, there's a whole bunch of other people also having that same existential crisis and freaking out. And now someone's talking about it. The first time I heard him say something, I was like, oh, that guy sounds kind of nuts. And then it took like the second time I was like, oh, he sounds like he's saying, oh, he's talking about all those things that I say that I think are nuts that I just don't say out loud. So, you know, after that,
was that the 2008 or 2012 kind of campaign that was
like 2008. That was like 2008. And then it happened again in 2012. And at that point, I was like, okay, there's a whole bunch of people like me. I was really like, even though I followed politics on TV, which is, you know, but prior to social media, to be fair, it's like, how do you even figure this stuff out? It's challenging. I didn't even know that you could join political parties. That hadn't occurred to me. I didn't know anything about it, you know, so it was like, oh, you can like join a party. So I don't think I joined the LP officially until at least 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you joined in 2014. You were out in California at the time. You got involved there, and then bing, bang, boom, you're the National Libertarian Party chair.
Well, I started doing stuff outside of the LP and just running into Libertarian Party people. So like I was working on cannabis legalization efforts, and there were all these competing ones right around that time. I was working on something called the SB 277 referendum, which was to repeal this very aggressive kids vaccination law that basically took away all medical exemptions and religious exemptions in public and private
in Maine.
Too. Yeah. Terrible.
That's why Maine's lost a lot of very good people and have moved to states like New Hampshire. But
yeah. California is not a good place if you're going to have babies. Not a great place. You got to homeschool for sure. But even then, I worried about people knocking on my door, which is why we eventually got out of there.
Yeah.
What else? So I was just working on that stuff. Eventually, like I was going to meetups like socially, I think starting in 2014, and then more regularly in 2016. And I had Ted Brown, the former California LP chair, try to get me to run for Congress. And I said, No. I am more of the like anarchist libertarian. I don't think I want to run for office. I like doing all this activism stuff outside of it. I don't think I want to like become a part of it. And he's just like, he's one of those dudes that like no means yes and yes means yes. And so he just continued. He would lose his mind if he heard me describe him like that. Ha ha, ha ha, gotcha. You're not here. You can't say anything. And so finally I just like gave in and was like, all right, you know. And I ran for Congress in a special election that year. And it was really exciting and fun. That we had a ton of media attention.
What year was that?
2017.
2017.
Early 2017.
All right.
So we had a ton of media attention. There were like 26 people running. It was almost all Democrats. It was a media zoo. They put a microphone in front of you, you know, and even LA Times, and you'd say whatever you want. You're like, I don't think taxes should exist. And they're like, oh, that's enough microphone for you. But you still got it out, you know? And so it was fun. It was really cool. And I decided to get active in the party after that. I ran to be the LA County chair. I maintained that for a few years. And, you know, I was the California secretary too, which is a very difficult job, and eventually became national chair when the national party just kind of shit the bed in 2020 and with its failure to speak out against lockdowns and mandates.
That certainly was, I think, one of the most defining moments of tyranny in this country. And it was, you know, I don't know the folks who were leading the LP at that time. I generally haven't always paid that much attention to the LP. So I'm sure there's plenty of very pleasant, fine people, you know,
very fine people.
There. But it certainly it certainly seemed like a massive missed opportunity where it was like, you know, it seemed like you were getting more defiance to tyranny from Liberty Republicans than you were from getting the people who said we are the party of principle. And all these Liberty Republicans are just sellouts who won't call themselves, who won't be real principled and actually run as libertarians and not win their races. So I guess that does bring us back to, I guess, where we were getting to is how do you view the Libertarian Party? What is your vision for the role of the Libertarian Party in the age that we're in? How does it fit into a larger libertarian movement strategy? And should Libertarian Party members and libertarians who operate through other political vehicles like the Republican Party, which I have done in the past, should we necessarily be at odds with each other, or are there ways that all these puzzle pieces fit together in a way that is a good grand strategy for advancing liberty?
Oh, that's a lot to take apart. Let's do it. We should not be at odds. It's totally stupid to be at odds. What is the role of the National Libertarian Party? We move the Overton window. I think that we as a Libertarian Party, capital L's, we can do and say outrageous things that might be a little too out of the box for you guys.
Oh, I've experienced that with our own state Libertarian Party.
Yeah. So maybe not that out of the box. That's like burning the box down and throwing it around. And you know.
I love those guys. I pick on them because I love them.
Sure. I also mostly love them. Yeah. Oh, thorns. Sometimes it's good to have a thorn in your side, like it, you know, if you need bloodletting, you know. So anyway, I think that it's our job to move the Overton window. It's our job to spread the message of liberty. It's our job to take courageous stances on things like opposing United States involvement in the war in Ukraine, opposing the United States sending money to Israel as they murder children in Gaza. It's also our job to support candidates and state affiliates. We got a lot to do, right? Those are like the big things. It's messaging and infrastructure. The infrastructure part is hard, right? And one of the things that we've been doing this year, and people are critical of me, and I say, you know, chill, because I'm going to help you maintain relevancy and also make the country more libertarian, is we've been bringing people together. We've been bringing them together with liberty being the guiding force. And that's what we've been doing at the national level, getting Donald Trump to come to our convention and talk about libertarianism, right? And make public commitments to us. And then he repeated some of them at the Bitcoin conference. That's what we should be doing. Talking about like federal issues, war, supporting an anti-war rally, getting involved in this. I put this new movement together called Rescue the Republic. And we have this beautiful graphic on our website. And at the front of, we took George Washington crossing the Delaware River, and we retooled it and put like Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump and Kennedy and Brett Weinstein and Russell Brand and all these people in it. And we put Lady Liberty at the front of the boat. It was like, how do we really make sure like that liberty is represented there? And that's how we did it. Like, we are not spoilers. We get called spoilers a lot. And I think that was a mindset that former leaders in the party embraced because they couldn't win anything. So we'll just ruin everything for everyone because you're not good enough for us. And certainly, like the Michigan Senate race, I think that's acceptable. The GOP Congress or the GOP senatorial candidate, I think, is like former CIA. Sorry.
Yeah, and they could have picked Justin Amash, and instead they went with the worst neocon you can ever pick. I think that's probably a fair place to be a spoiler and
and Justin Amash probably shouldn't have engaged in the impeachment derangement syndrome, to be fair.
There's a Liberty Republican official here in New Hampshire who used this great analogy. I'd never heard it summed up so well about what it's like to be a libertarian working within the Republican coalitions. And he said it's kind of like in the TV show The Walking Dead. Do you ever watch The Walking Dead? You ever seen it?
I have.
All right. It's like, so when they learn that if you cover yourself in the blood and gore of the zombies, right? The zombies will think you're one of them.
Yes.
And you'll be able to walk amongst the herd, and occasionally you can even steer the herd in better directions where you want it to go. But then someone does something stupid, like they step on a rake or something, and then all of a sudden all the zombie herd realizes that ain't one of us, right? And it feels like that's kind of what Justin Amash did. He stepped on the rake. And
now that I am somewhat connected to people in the Trump campaign and people who are close to him, I've gotten to see Liberty Republicans through their lens. And it's like people like Mike Lee, phenomenal job. He is he's the best tightrope walker I have ever met. He came to the convention and he just nailed it on stage in the Federal Reserve. People were cheering, going nuts. And then he was support Donald Trump. And people no, boo, lost their minds. But he's so good at walking that tightrope. And then there are some other people in the GOP who are running who got primaried by people who I do not think are better candidates at all. And when I ask about it, and I asked Donald Trump about one of them, when I had the pleasure of having dinner with him, he's like, terrible guy. Said horrible things about me, campaigned against me, this, that. So I'm like, this is just basic politics. We got to be a little bit smarter. If you spend, 2 years screaming at Donald Trump about how much he sucks and don't elect him, elect Ron DeSantis, he is terrible. It's not a surprise that Donald Trump's I'm not endorsing that guy. It's just really pretty basic.
Yeah. I mean, it is, on the one hand, of course, Trump engages in very personal politics very much, but it's I don't know if it was Rand Paul who said it this way, or maybe it was I think it was Thomas Massey, but he articulated, I guess, the kind of way that, when I was in the Maine Senate, I tried to approach relations with my own kind of populist Republican governor, Paula Page, who was liberty on some things, not liberty on others, which is when they do the right thing, praise them loudly and by name. But when they do the wrong thing, criticize the policy and don't make it personal, right? And I know some people will say it's well, you're just playing into the tribal bullshit, and it's actually, because that's how human beings work.
This is it's politics. It's politics. It has been very eye-opening and interesting to see that a lot of Liberty Republicans have the same behavioral defects as card-carrying libertarians. It's highly disagreeable, highly disagreeable. You don't play nice with others. You got to call it out right away when you don't like it. Like, that sucks. That's bad. That's going to kill people. That's going to ruin our country. But we don't know how to like soften it or try to like work it out behind the scenes first. So
Yeah.
my takeaway, like, it actually, like, it made me feel worse for the country, but it made me feel better about the party, as I was like, we're not the only retards. So we have a lot in common, I think.
Every libertarian, whether a big L, small L, if you're engaged in politics, every libertarian should read How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Being a disagreeable prick might make you feel good and make you feel more principled and give you kind of a sense of moral authority, but it doesn't actually help advance liberty. And if it's about advancing liberty and not about our egos, we should do the things that are the most effective to advancing liberty. At least that's what I think.
I agree.
But back to something you mentioned, of course, I was there at the convention. It was my first LP convention I'd ever been to. And I will say I did appreciate that, considering some of the national Republican conventions I've been to, which, I mean, maybe not to the degree that the Democratic conventions have devolved, but certainly to a large degree, these major party conventions have devolved into mere pageantry where everything is scripted and like, you could try to make motions from the floor, but if it's not in the script, they're not turning on your microphone, and you're going to be kind of ignored. I saw you handle a lot of objections. I think it turned out after the fact, many of them were intentionally dilatory objections, trying to mess with the schedule and all of that. Maybe one lesson learned is to call out dilatory motions, but you processed it, you handled it. You got through it. I was amazed to see a national convention that actually felt like a real convention where the delegates were more than just props. But of course, at that convention, Bobby Kennedy spoke, Donald Trump spoke, the folks running for the LP nomination spoke. But of course, Donald Trump made several very specific promises to libertarians if people joined his coalition, including the appointment of a libertarian to a cabinet position. What have been the developments on that since that promise was made? Is that something that's still very much on the table? What would that potentially look like? And what would that mean for the liberty movement if it was actualized?
So I'm super excited about this. It is definitely still on the table. I have maintained contact with his team and people who know him personally, people who will probably be in the next administration. I think, and it's not in writing. He's not able to do that, but I think it's going to be Department of Education, because they want it abolished. We want it abolished. It's just like a done deal. It's easy. It's hard for us to screw that one up. Betsy DeVos got it last time, and he was not super complimentary of her when I asked him about her, which I was surprised by. He's pretty complimentary of a lot of people, but not that one. So I've passed some names on. It's not going to be anybody who's swimming around in a Libertarian Party Facebook group. It's no, probably like an active or a retired judge, somebody who works at one of the like libertarian like law organizations,
like an Institute for Justice or Pacific Legal Foundation, something like that.
Exactly. You got to pass Senate confirmation. So it's not going to be me. It's not going to be me.
I'm picturing you, Angela, in front of a Senate committee hearing, answering all kinds of questions from about your plans to abolish the Department of Education.
I will abolish it. I will not try to abolish it beyond legislative means. I will, if it's a legislative thing, I will ensure that we still have 2 interns making $14 an hour in a broom closet. I promise to uphold all the legislative stuff.
All right. Another promise that Donald Trump made at the convention was to commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht. Now, I know I've heard a lot of people, and on the one hand, this seems like one of the most tangible, easiest to follow through on
Mhm.
promises that could be made. This could be a day one thing, right?
Yeah.
No Senate confirmation hearing needed for that. Just signing a piece of paper. And yet many people are still skeptical that Donald Trump would actually follow through on that promise. Ross's mom, certainly, it doesn't seem skeptical. I know she's all gung-ho for like,
Yeah.
this is the clearest path to getting Ross his freedom. I guess, what do you have to say to that? And to what degree is skepticism founded or unfounded?
I think that it's totally healthy and normal to be skeptical of a promise that any politician makes. But I think there's a difference between skepticism and like outright refusal and like nihilism and rejection of optimism. I think everybody should be like a little bit skeptical, but very optimistic. Engaging with someone in politics like this is like, that's a very easy promise to make, right? That's a very easy promise to make. It's much lower hanging fruit than a cabinet position. And as a human being, sometimes you want to just kind of engage in an act of faith and trust. And you're like, this is like part of the human condition. I don't know you very well. You made a commitment to me. So I am going to reach out and place my trust in you that you're going to fulfill that, knowing that, maybe sometimes you've been a snake in the past, and maybe sometimes I've been a snake in the past, and we haven't always held our promises and commitments throughout our, childhood, adolescent, adult lives. But right now we both really want something and we want to make it happen. And so we're going to make this agreement and trust each other and try to hold each other to that agreement. And that's what we're doing right now. And this is something that I think maybe Liberty Republicans can learn on too. Like you have a little room here to learn, guys. Treat someone well when they make a promise to you and motivate them and inspire them to like hold their word, to keep their word. That's what I want to do. People are like, you don't trash Donald Trump enough. You don't do this, do that. There's a man's life that hangs in the balance. And I want to see him freed out of prison. So yeah, I'm going to be civil to Donald Trump. When he does a good job, I'm going to say good job. When he doesn't do a good job, I'm going to say, maybe this or that next time. I'm going to like behave myself. And if you enter into sort of this like, mental like agreement or wondering whether or not he's going to keep his word, and all you're doing is trashing him and just like really like hating on him aggressively, well, of course you would enter into the mindset that he's not going to keep his word. Because if he looked at you and engaged with you, why would he?
Yeah. Well, let me ask about some of the shifting kind of court politics of kind of some movements rising, some movements falling within certain orbits of Donald Trump, who, odds are fairly good. Odds are he'll be the next president, or Kamala Harris. I guess it's going to be one of the two of them. The neocons, right? I hear different things, right? I hear on the one hand, Bobby Kennedy came out, in my conversations with Donald Trump, as he decided to throw his support behind him, says Donald Trump came out very aggressively and he's not happy with the neocons and he wants them out. And yet at the same time, he still praises people like Mike Pompeo, who got a big main stage slot at the RNC. And there's some talk that he could be the Secretary of Defense.
I don't think so.
I hope not. That's what I heard from Dan McKnight with Bring Our Troops Home, was that was the talk. At least that was the talk as of the time that I saw him at the Republican National Convention over a month ago now. What is your assessment of kind of like the state of play with kind of the Trump world and the neocon world? Obviously, many neocons have like gone totally over to the Kamala side of the force.
Yes, which is good.
Yeah. I would, hey, if we lose Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and we pick up Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy, like those are great trade. Make that trade any day of the week.
Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, you still have, I mean, still so much in Washington. The neocons wield a lot of influence within the Republican Party in Congress. You still have people like Lindsey Graham who are kind of, still pushing the same agenda, but will be the Trump sycophant with the hopes that they still wield some influence in the Trump orbit as long as they're heaping praise on him and appealing to his ego. What's your assessment of where the neoconservative movement is right now in a Trump-run Republican Party?
It is crumbling. Certain aspects of it are trying to assimilate into MAGA and to appeal to libertarianism. And it's interesting, as they do that, they become weakened because they have to be. So there's a downside, and there's an upside. The upside is that they become weakened and their agenda crumbles a little bit. The downside is that they can potentially influence other people, with their crappy views, and they kind of swim in the same soup as us. But I choose to look at it as the positive. I don't think that we're going to get libertarian foreign policy in this administration. I think that probably what's going to happen is there's going to be some, counterstrikes, one-offs, whatever, that I don't like, just like what happened with, like Soleimani and Syria. I think you're probably going to get that level of action as Donald Trump comes in and in his mind does what he needs to do to clean things up abroad. It's not the role I would take, by any means. But I don't think the neocons are going to influence him so much that he's going to declare war anywhere. I think he's very wary of that, and he loves the talking point that he hasn't started any new wars, and he's going to stick to that. And the neocons who push him past that, I think, are out. And it's just going to be a battle of influence. Really, it's a battle of influence between like libertarians and liberty adjacent people like Vivek Ramaswamy and like the Giuliani types. It's really, who didn't screw him over? Who does he think he can trust? And so I'm like, come on, guys, like suck it up in a couple of other areas. Foreign policy is going to be like, but if you have the opportunity to influence him to not murder like 2,000 people, if you could save the lives of like a few thousand people in the Middle East, like, do it.
And I think that's kind of I think that is kind of one of the hard questions for people to struggle with. I mean, obviously, like, a Rand Paul presidency would be like more ideal, for the things we care about. But, with Trump, it was nice to see that, like, whenever Rand Paul went out golfing with Donald Trump, Donald Trump would decide, maybe I shouldn't start a war with Iran. Right. So Trump is like, on the one hand, he seems like he's not very ideological one way or the other when it comes to these matters.
He's not.
He's not a neoconservative. He's not an ideologue in that way, but he's not the ideology that we want to have. But he does seem he's movable. He's influenceable. Why would we not want to have people kind of in his circle who can move him and influence him in the right direction?
He's the make a deal guy. He loves to make deals. Like, that's like not fake. That's like very much, that's him. So, when I went to talk with him, I was like, okay, I was told like, he loves to make deals. So you need to try to make a deal with him. What do you want? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, we don't mean that much. I was like, could you please free Ross Ulbricht and Julian Assange? That was my ask, and Ross Ulbricht, it was just like, yes, done. Julian Assange, it was like, maybe. Let me think about that. But like, that's just me in my lowly little position being like, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. There are people who are in much greater positions of authority than I am. They just need to go and try to make those deals, like push for whatever you think is peaceful, non-US involvement in the Middle East. Like, try to minimize that. I think we're still going to have a lot of drama with Iran, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But do everything else you can.
Yeah, I wonder, with the opportunity for at least one libertarian and maybe even if we're lucky, some additional bonus libertarian-ish people in the cabinet. And it is exciting. I mean, people can say what they want about J.D. Vance, and I think there's many very legitimate criticisms with J.D. Vance, but it is somewhat historic to look at a Republican presidential ticket and to see that there's not a neoconservative in the
Yes.
top or bottom spot of the ticket, which is the
Yes.
first time in my lifetime that that's the case, right? Not to say that JD Vance is a libertarian non-interventionist. He's not, but he's at least marginally a step away from the
He
Bush era
is.
foreign
He is a
policy.
step away from it. He is not a blood-soaked monster.
Yeah,
I
take
don't agree.
progress where you can get it, and I guess he's really good on cryptocurrency too. Like he was,
Yep.
which is something.
Who'd you pick? JD Vance or Dan Crenshaw? Think about it like that. Like if we're thinking about younger people who are
or Marco
figures.
Rubio or boy, no, it's I guess of the people who are realistically within the Overton window of picks, JD Vance was one of the better ones we could have hoped for, but there's certainly there's again, right, we're grading on a curve here, right? These are not
we are pushing things in the right direction. It's a lot of work. We just have to keep pushing and influencing. Like I'm so much happier with JD Vance than Tim Scott.
Yeah, I was worried about Tim Scott too, in that he just seems a little bit like a yes man for a lot of the interests that I don't agree with in DC. Yeah. I don't know how sincerely he believes the neocons and all that, but he certainly seems happy to regurgitate their talking points.
Yep.
Okay, but we're past the 50-minute mark, and I wanted to ask you. I assume, did you catch the debate last night?
I did. I did.
We've only got a few minutes, but I have to ask, what were your takeaways from the debate? Do you think it moved the needle in any particular direction? How do you think? Anyway, let me not bias the questions. What were your takeaways?
Well, I thought that Donald Trump came across as very frustrated. I think he was probably rightfully frustrated because the moderators, quote unquote, were asking questions that were heavily biased against him. And Kamala didn't get questions that were biased against her.
I thought it was interesting, right? The fact checking. Everyone's talking about the fact checking, right? They fact checked him 5 times. Kamala says things that aren't true. I mean, even Kamala even brought up the very fine people hoax again, which even Snopes has discredited, right? Even
it's
Snopes.
Terrible. It's terrible how they get away with that. It was personal, and he makes jabs at her, but they're not lies. Her jabs at him were lies. And I think, he got in some good zingers on her. So that was good. I think he rambled a little too much. I think he talked too much about immigration. I get that it's his pet project and pain point. But, when asked about economics, I think he should have talked about how he championed deregulation, because that's what's going to pull us out of, this economic lurch is, unchaining business so that people can make money and flourish. He didn't talk about his strengths so much. And that was a bummer. I think Kamala was a lot more polished than people anticipated because we were so used to her off the cuff, drunken wine mom. She did used to be a prosecutor. And, I kind of think when it comes to speeches and long, free-form conversation, that's Donald Trump's wheelhouse, and that's where he excels. But when it comes to arguing in short, 1 to 2 minute segments, that's probably Kamala's strength, just because of her background.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see if it moves the needle at all in any particular direction. I walked away thinking it was, I don't know. It was certainly very boring compared to the last presidential debate.
Yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't good. So I hope that, that the next one is better. It made me anxious.
Is there going to be a next one?
I think there's going to be one on Fox. I would really like to see them. I feel like we're right on the edge of being able to do it. Have one moderated by Lex Friedman or someone. Not Joe Rogan. They're not going to pick Joe for, a bunch of reasons, but can we pick someone like Lex? I feel like that would be amazing.
Yeah. You can't ask for someone who's a fairer, but of course, Democrats in these races don't want fair. They want their corporate media buddies.
It was a 3-on-1 debate. It was a 3-on-1.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, we are coming up. We're running out of time. Any final words, Angela, you want to share with folks before we wrap up here?
Absolutely. I want to invite everyone to come down to Washington, D.C. on September 29th. That's a Sunday for the Rescue the Republic rally and event. We are going to have a ton of amazing speakers and musical guests and comedians. It's an all-day event. It's free in front of the Washington Monument. This is an effort spearheaded by me, Brett Weinstein, and Matt Toon, creator of the Defeat the Mandate series. And this is the big unity event of the year. We are hoping to change the face of national politics. And I think we're achieving it. So I would love to see the Free State represented there. You guys are the tip of the spear on states' rights. Come join us and make it a trifecta perfect event.
All right. I'll have to look at it, see if we can make it work. And I guess I return the invitation to you. We would love to have you come and join us at PorcFest next year. So
yes,
hope that works out for you next June. And that goes to everyone watching. We want you at PorcFest and at the Rage Against the War Machine.
Yes, please.
Events. All right, Angela. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today, and really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to seeing you in DC or in the Imperial City or in the Free State. So, thank you, Angela. All right, everyone. That's the show. A few things. First of all, I want to thank again our episode sponsor, Porcupine Real Estate, for sponsoring this episode. And again, if you like Shakespeare, if you like Star Wars, come to a mashup of them both this Sunday at the Shell Clubhouse in the New Hampshire Free Coast. Details on the community calendar at fsp.org for this play reading. Look, I want to be clear. It's not like a full production. We aren't doing like actually this hasn't been rehearsed at all. We're just reading through the play, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Come on out, free to attend, and donations accepted at the door to cover expenses and all of that. Thank you to our technical producer, as always, Renita, for running things behind the scenes. And furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.